We are halfway through the fantasy season. We have 3 weeks, maybe less, till trade deadlines are here. So we need to make a trade, and we need to make it now. And Ty, before I give it to you for your first one, I need to give you a little pat on the back. Because last week you said to buy James Cook and Ladd McConkey. James Cook, running back 1 on the week. Ladd McConkey, wide receiver 2 on the week. That was fantastic. I hope you guys listened last week. And you know what? You might repeat it again this week with these two guys. I'm not saying they're going to finish 1 and 2, but I think they're going to be pretty good this week. So Ty, take away with your running back buy before week 9.
David Montgomery, Mr. Monty himself. The past 2 weeks have created a tiny window, a glimmer of hope if you are looking to buy a running back. And I think David Montgomery is just that guy to go buy. Look back at week 7 against Minnesota. He only had 9 rushing attempts for 31 yards. This past week against Tennessee, he had 9 attempts again for 33 yards, but he found the end zone. But none of those performances are his own fault or any, they are not indicative of David Montgomery in any kind of way. They were very much situational workloads, right? Week 7, he got hurt, and Jahmyr Gibbs was just too good to take off the field in that game. Week 8 for the Lions, they only ran 47 plays because the defense was playing so well, special teams was playing so well. I mean, Jared Goff threw for less than 100 yards and still had 3 touchdowns. Like, everything was rolling for Detroit. 4 of David Montgomery's 9 carries on Sunday were also inside the 15-yard line. So you know the role, you know the player that is David Montgomery in one of the best offenses in the league. And just as a reminder, the guy was averaging 15 fantasy points before these past 2 weeks. Again, it's a great player on a great offense. You know the role. He's definitely a running back to go target at this point.
Can we just say how wild it is that Jared Goff had under 100 passing yards? This team put up 56 points.
Seriously.
I mean, that's just silly. That is absolutely stupid. But that's just how the Detroit Lions have been playing. They've been on fire, all facets of the game, and it's just, what are you going to do when you're playing against some and they're just absolutely rolling like this, right? Got beat by Tampa early, only really had one truly close game against the Vikings. Otherwise, they've just been kind of blowing teams out this season. And like you said, that's perfect for David Montgomery because he's their ground and pound, find the end zone type of guy. And if you don't think this team's going to score touchdowns anymore this season, I got news for you. They're probably going to lead the league in touchdowns the rest of the season. So I'm with you. I'm all in on David Montgomery. We did that redraft yesterday. He was in my top 24 players. I had him as a round 2. I had him as a round 2 player because of how consistent and how good he's been. He's averaging, I want to say, 0.1 points less than Breece Hall right now in PPR formats. That's how good David Montgomery's. That's how good he's been playing. And like Ty said, you finally have the buy window to get in on that. And so, yeah, I would take full advantage of it. He's a guy.
Ooh. It's the same. 16.2.
So I mean, I'm not saying, but I'm just saying I'm all in on David Montgomery from that aspect. My running back by an older running back too, same division. I'm going with Aaron Jones on this one. I don't think he quite has the same week-to-week stability as David Montgomery, right? Because I think David Montgomery's just got such a great role. But at the same time, he only has 2 games on the season with under 14 carries, with under 90 scrimmage yards. He has the 10th easiest remaining running back schedule for the rest of the season. He's still seeing over 67% opportunity share, which we were kind of worried about to start the season. Is Ty Chandler going to eat into this? This is going to be closer to 50-50 as they try to preserve Aaron Jones. But no, this 29-year-old running back on a brand new team is showing, hey, I still got juice. I still got stuff left in the tank. He looks good on the field, top 15 in carries, targets, and red zone opportunities. I think this Vikings team is going to continue to get better as the season goes on. Obviously, losing Christian Darrisaw, right? That is a big blow on that offensive line. Like, we can't, I don't want to understate that, but I think at the same time they're going to continue to score touchdowns. And he only has 3 total touchdowns on the year, 2 rushing touchdowns. So I think there's still upside for him to get better. I like Aaron Jones rest of the season.
Yeah, I do too. And you use a perfect word to describe Aaron Jones compared to David Montgomery. It's the stability and the consistency, you could also call it. But the fact is, when you are gearing up for fantasy playoffs, you want to target the good offenses, right? The teams that are going to put up the most amount of points. Minnesota should continue to put up points. Like you said, Darisaw is a big loss on that offensive line, but they're going to continue to put up points just based on who they are playing the rest of the year, right? You could also make that same argument for a guy like James Conner, for a guy like Brian Robinson. But again, if we're going to look at the best offenses, if we're going to just take those three, Minnesota, Arizona, and Washington, Minnesota is probably going to be the first offense that you want on your fantasy team for the rest of the season. You know, you can make an argument for Washington, make an argument for Arizona, but I think objectively, just this Minnesota offense will continue to put up points more consistently, more often than the other teams that I have mentioned. So yeah, big fan of Aaron Jones as well. Again, target the good players on good offenses, right? Aaron Jones, David Montgomery fit that bill to a T.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. And the receiving game has just been such a huge part for him since week 2. 36, 46, 46, 24, 23, 37 receiving yards. Those are his totals. You love to see that from the running back position. If you're watching us over on YouTube right now, or if you're listening to the audio podcast, thank you very much. But if you're not subscribed, hit that subscribe button right now. Turn that wrist just a little bit, you 93%ers who aren't subscribed to our content yet watching. Did you know, Ty, last week, 60% of our views came from returning viewers? That means they've heard this message multiple times and still not hit that subscribe button. So make sure that you check down below that you are subscribed. I won't heckle you anymore. We'll keep moving on, but we want you part of the fellowship. That's all we want. So Ty, I mentioned it earlier. You had Ladd McConkey as your buy last week. I had Devonta Smith, and those two were wide receiver 2, wide receiver 7. So people, I'm not saying, but I'm just saying you better listen to these two names right here, because it could be pretty good for you next week. So who is your wide receiver buy?
Yeah, boy, the pressure is on now. We gotta back up what we did last week.
Yes,
wide receiver buy for me this week, T. Higgins of the Cincinnati Bengals. He missed this past week with a quad injury that he picked up on Friday in practice. And that does cast some uncertainty moving forward, right? We don't know how severe it is. Zach Taylor said that he's day to day. So there's some optimism in that it's not a week to week kind of thing. But again, we just take a look at when T. Higgins has been active this year from weeks 3 to 7. He's the wide receiver 10 in usage. He's averaging 16 fantasy points per game and 9 targets per game as well. And now the fantasy playoff schedule also isn't spectacular, right? And specifically, right, you get Tennessee and Denver in 2 of your last 4 weeks of the season. But Cincinnati is currently out of the playoff picture. Right, they're currently 3-5. They need to start racking up wins right now. So you're going to benefit from the immediate, in the short term, I should say, of Cincinnati relying on this passing game, because that's been working for them all year long. And they're going to need late season wins as well. So I'm not expecting, right, when you go up against Tennessee and Denver, that they're going to just completely avoid, what's been working for them. They're going to rely on it even more. So I'm not totally scared off by the matchups. Again, they're tough, but I'm not scared off by them. Again, back to this theme of good players on good offenses. T. Higgins certainly fits that bill as well.
Yeah, and you look at, those matchups, Tennessee, Denver. Denver, you're scared of Patrick Surtain. Tennessee, you're a little more nervous about L'Jarius Sneed. Jamar Chase is taking those matchups. That's what benefits T. Higgins. No, the defenses as a whole are still good, right? I'm not saying, all of a sudden he gets a field day against whoever the quarterback 2 is. No, they're still good defenses. But instead of taking those, cornerback ones on those teams, he does get a little more favorable matchup in those ones. And we're seeing the shift back this year, where Jamar Chase is going more back to what we saw his rookie year, using him downfield, some big plays, touchdown monster. And T. Higgins but his role is morphed, right? He's not the same, because in that year, he was also kind of the downfield guy, but we don't have Tyler Boyd anymore. So we see him kind of playing a little more across the middle, 11 to 12 yards per reception rather than a 14, 15. So that's why he's seeing the increase in targets. I think T. Higgins is great, but I think as long as he's healthy, as long as we can get him back healthy, he needs to be in your starting lineup rest of the season. I think he's a top 15 option. I think we talk about league winning upside. T. Higgins for sure possesses that. My wide receiver buy is a guy I just can't let go of, and it's DJ Moore. He, it's been very up and down to say the least for DJ Moore and just the Chicago offense as a whole, especially from the wide receiver perspective. Right, we've had Rome had a week, Keenan Allen had a week, and DJ Moore's had a week or two. But DJ Moore has been consistently leading this team in targets and yards throughout the season. He and the Bears as a whole have the 5th easiest remaining schedule and the 3rd easiest remaining playoff schedule. So, right, great matchups to come. Caleb Williams has shown that he plays well in good matchups. In tougher matchups, yeah, he struggles a little bit more, but in good matchups, he plays well. The reason I'm in on DJ Moore more than Rome, more than Keenan Allen, is we've seen DJ Moore, especially last season, throughout his career, he can be a big play guy. He can go score 60-yard touchdowns, right? He can break those, and he's on the field more than both the other wide receivers. He's 6th in snap share so far this season. He is the wide receiver one in this offense, meaning he's on the field all the time, right? Keenan and Rome may switch in and out, but DJ Moore is always on the field. Now, I know the efficiency numbers aren't great, but that's why you have a buy window on DJ Moore. You're buying into, I believe in the talent. I believe that his quarterback's going to get better, and I believe that they're going to be able to exploit these easy matchups that they have for the rest of the season.
I like DJ Moore as a buy, right? Just from the standpoint and viewpoint that you just presented of, again, Caleb should be getting better. DJ Moore is a good talent, right? I'm always in this inner conflict of like, do I trust Shane Waldron? Do I trust him yet? I had reason going into the bye to trust him. Coming out of the bye, I maintained that trust. And then for whatever reason, it just did not translate, did not carry over through the bye week. And I do wonder how much of, we've talked about too with Chicago, right? The defenses that they've been going up against have been fairly QB friendly for Caleb. What exactly happens in these not so friendly QB matchups for Caleb? But we still have 2 more games in this window of friendly matchups for him to kind of recorrect after this past week, to kind of get a hot streak going. And if that were to happen, that benefits all the pass catchers. And you would think, again, for a guy that leads the team in targets and yards like DJ Moore, it's going to benefit him the most. So again, it may not feel, like a very, you may not feel super great about it in your heart because, again, it's Shane Waldron. But the reasoning is there, right? And it's at this point, it's worth just taking the shot on because you don't have to give up a ton for DJ Moore. So I would agree with you. Definitely go throw out an offer to DJ Moore in your leagues because the payoff can be substantial.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, he is a buy low right now. You are buying him low and projecting that he is going to bounce back. He's only had 1 game inside the top 30 wide receiver or 24 wide receivers, or 2 games inside the top 24 wide receivers this season. So, right, it hasn't been fantastic, but you're buying and projecting, hey, we're going to see a rebound for DJ Moore. I do want to give a little honorable mention in this spot. Me and you had both discussed this player, Jalen Waddle, excuse me. We, didn't move forward with him just because we've talked about Tyreek and Devon Achane 2 of the last 3 weeks. So the argument was going to be pretty similar of, hey, Tua wasn't here, Tua's here. But I just want to throw him out there as a name at least, so that you guys, if you're like, oh, what do you think about him? Jalen Waddle's a guy we would target as well. Do you have any thoughts quickly on Jalen Waddle, Ty?
If you thought DJ Moore was a buy low, Jalen Waddle is an even bigger buy low right now. You can get him on the cheap right now. And again, he hasn't put up, numbers so far this year that makes you go like, ooh, I really want to have him on my team. But again, for the payoff for the second half of the season, now that Tua is back, like, why wouldn't you at least try?
Yeah, no, and he's averaging over 16 points per game through his career with Tua. So That's some pretty good upside right there. Alrighty, we're gonna take a quick break before our sells and hear from our friends over at Underdog Fantasy.
Today's podcast episode is brought to you by our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. Now, we love Underdog. It is the easiest place to play best ball formats, and they even have their own form of player props called Pick'em. You can make up to 20 times your money on a single night by correlating props together. 2 picks will triple your money, 3 will 6 times it, 4 will 10 times it, and 5 plays that all hit will multiply your entry by 20. You can even place insurance on your picks too, so if only 4 of your 5 props hit, you still get 10 times your entry. And if you use our code FELLAS when signing up, Underdog is going to double your first deposit up to $100.
We are back. We have our sells. I don't know if you noticed, but Lucas did back off and go back to his re-intro. So we have corrected that mistake in the fellas internally, right? We had a boxing match and I won, so he has backed off. He is back to his side.
I ref
Ty.
It was gruesome.
Thank you. And yeah, but it was also like a unanimous vote that I won because it was a knockout, so we didn't even have a vote. But Ty, your running back sell, who do you got this week?
Bit of a controversial one, I think. Some people may disagree with it. I'm saying to sell Jordan Mason this week. The Christian McCaffrey return and timeline feels more real at this point than speculation. Obviously, there's going to be a ramp-up period for Christian McCaffrey, so it's not going to be like an immediate Week 10 regression for Jordan Mason. It's going to be a slow and steady regression as McCaffrey kind of works his way back. And I completely get holding on Mason right now, just on the chance that McCaffrey's timeline gets pushed back, or the fact that Mason would instantly become one of the most valuable handcuffs in all of fantasy football just because you know what the role is if McCaffrey were to miss any more game time. But personally, I'm going to try and upgrade if I can, and if not, just try to get equal return right now. And maybe the guy that I'm getting with equal return just has, I would call better rest of the season upside, because I don't want to deal with the lingering question of like, well, when is McCaffrey going to come back? Right. Because you know that when he does come back, maybe I should say, if he comes back, Mason will obviously kind of play second fiddle to McCaffrey here. So I don't need to get into stats about Mason here either. You know the workload, you know the volume, you know the offense. To me, it's just a matter of taking advantage of an opportunity that may not be here or be there as soon as next week.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, like, Jordan Mason's been good from an NFL perspective, but since week 3, he's had 10, 24, 8, 9, 9, and 1.8 fantasy points since then. So, right, we have this like notion in our heads that, oh, he's been really good, but he really hasn't. He just doesn't have the receiving work you want to see. So I guess the question is, are we talking, you're trading, obviously you're not going to go be able to get David Montgomery for Jordan Mason, but Chuba Hubbard, is he a guy you're interested in? Obviously Jonathan Brooks coming back, but he hasn't started practicing again. Or are you holding on to him? Just throwing out a couple other names quick. Let's see. Bucky Irving, do you have interest in over Jordan Mason? Like, that's the range I'm thinking. I guess I'm just wondering, what range of players are you thinking you're going to try and go get for Jordan Mason?
The Chuba one is interesting because you can look at them both as like, hey, they're going to be in split backfields when their counterpart will be coming back, right? McCaffrey for the Niners and Brooks for the Panthers. You could try to do that. I might try and package Mason and go get a guy that I mentioned earlier when talking about about Aaron Jones and David Montgomery, like a James Conner, like I might even try to go get Najee right now, just because of it may be a little tough to get Najee here, but I'm okay packaging Mason up, right? And now you got to make sure that the running back you're getting in return is an upgrade, right? Like you're not going to sell another player along with Mason because on the chance that McCaffrey is not going to return to week 13 at all of a sudden, you are getting rid of, a pretty valuable piece on your fantasy team. I in terms of just equal return though, kind of back to what you had asked, I think Chuba is a good target. If I'm feeling lucky, I would probably go do like a Chase Brown at that point. That's who I'm probably going to go target for equal return.
So this is just a real hypothetical. And you're interested in trying to move Mason for a Tyrone Tracy, who's been hot 3 of the last 4 weeks?
Man, see, now this is where it gets into a because you can look at it from a wow, we're going from the Niners offense to the Giants offense.
Mm-hmm. No,
it'd
be a gross trade. It'd be a gross trade.
It's a gross trade. But Tyrone Tracy has been doing numbers, right? Like he's been doing well lately. So I kind of get that. I think if you're going to go gross, I would go gross like a Javonte Williams kind of gross. And you wait for Javonte to kind of like come back down to earth a little bit. He kind of did this past week, but give it another week or two or something like that.
For sure.
I feel like that's the kind of gross range that you're kind of looking for.
Definitely. My running back sell, I hate it. I don't even want to say it. I really didn't even want to bring him up, but I have to. It's J.K. Dobbins. And I understand we all like him. Trust me. I mean, I've been hoping that we'd see this from Dobbins for a while. But over the last 5 weeks, his yards per carry each week, 2.9, 2.3, 3.8, 2.9, 3.4. He just hasn't been efficient, right? We haven't seen him hit the big run like he did each of the first 2 weeks, which is fine, right? Because he's been getting the volume. The issue comes with the fact that he is the 5th hardest running back schedule rest of the season. Now, is that going to stop Jim Harbaugh from trying to run the ball? Absolutely not. But at the same time, Jim Harbaugh is not going to be afraid to run the ball 20 times for 60 yards because that's just who he is. And that can be the outcome that I see happening for a guy like J.K. Dobbins. I think Dobbins has been a good enough story. I think people see the volume. They're like, oh, hey, 2 of the last 3 weeks, he's had 18 and 16 fantasy points coming off the touchdown. But right now, J.K. Dobbins truly is a touchdown-dependent player. He is his 4 weeks with over 15 fantasy points, he has a touchdown. His 3 weeks with single-digit fantasy points, he doesn't. So does he score a touchdown or does he not? This Chargers team just is not moving the ball. I will say Justin Herbert's looked awesome the last couple of weeks. I give him his flowers. He's looked fantastic. But he has nobody. He's not throwing to anybody. He's throwing to Ladd, and then he's throwing to Jalen Reagor. Right? It is disgusting. It's gross. Want nothing to do with it. But yeah, these are his last 6 games. Baltimore, Atlanta, Kansas City. Atlanta and Kansas City. He's in Atlanta, in Kansas City, then Tampa, then Denver, and he gets New England. So you're okay kind of with Tampa, New England, but those 4 other games are rough. I just think it's time to cut bait on J.K. Dobbins and move on.
It pains me to agree with you on this one. You said it best. He's a touchdown dependent running back at this point. Like getting 3 to 3 catches a game roughly as an average, right? He had a game with 2, but he had a game with 4 with 7 targets this past Sunday. But 3 catches is pretty solid for J.K. Dobbins, all things considered. But again, he's getting touches, but they're just not going anywhere. Like it's similar to, this is a gross comparison, but I feel it feels very similar to Najee Harris of sorts before Russ really kind of took over in Pittsburgh, right? Where that he's going to get touches, but they're just not going to go anywhere. So I will say too, as a J.K. Dobbins manager in Dynasty, I am dreading this week in this upcoming week as well, because I'm just like, what do I do with J.K. Dobbins? Right. Not only do you have to worry about the rest of this year, but you have to think about the next year or two, right? Because it is Dynasty, right? So this is a tough one. And I think the only logical reason or the only logical conclusion you can come to is you got to cut your ties here.
Yeah, it is unfortunate. Like we've both said, we don't want to. This is one of those where the brains kind of went out over the heart here. Unfortunately, if you want to make the right move. Before our wide receiver sells, make sure you join that Discord. We got that link in the bio. I think we're pushing 4K right now over there, answering questions all the time. You might be saying, oh, the season's almost over. Well, Dynasty season kicks off here by the end of the season. So if your redraft team's done, you can hop on in and ask Dynasty questions. If your team's still in it, ask those trade questions, start sit questions, waiver wire questions. Find all our content over there. So make sure you join in the link that is in the description of the audio podcast or video that you are watching. All right, Ty, let's do it. 2 more sells. Who is your wide receiver sell?
This is where it gets gross. Okay. Fair warning, Calvin Ridley. Okay. It's pretty straightforward here, isn't it? I mean, wide receiver 5 on the week, 10 catches, 15 targets. I mean, come on now. It doesn't get as straightforward as that. You need to package him up and just try to upgrade if you can. I think the game that we saw this past Sunday, the chances of us seeing 2 more of those pretty slim. I just think that they're going to be few and far between. Again, with no DeAndre Hopkins, it opens the door for some of these kind of games. I just don't want to deal with the headache, right? I don't want to deal with the headache of a Will Levis, right? And Brian Callahan, the head coach, play caller for the Titans, has already said, has said in previous weeks, hey, when Will Levis is healthy, like, he's going to be in. And when that happens, I want nothing to do with this Tennessee offense at that point. So I'm willing to bet that there is someone in your league or in a league that says, well, hey, DeAndre Hopkins isn't there anymore. There is that person in your league and you have Calvin Ridley. Go sell Ridley to that manager right now. Because again, I just don't think, the inconsistencies, the headache that it's going to give you week to week is just not worth it. This might just be the season high game for Calvin Ridley this year for all we know. And it may quite literally get, worse than it already has been. Again, I just don't want any part of it. So you got to move him at this point.
Yeah, it is gross. And I'll admit, before the season started, I was in on Calvin Ridley and Deontay Johnson. I thought both offenses were going to be good enough that, hey, these guys are going to see ridiculous volume. They haven't been. So like Ty said, if Will Levis is in, to me, that's the equivalent of you saying, hey, I want to go buy Deontay Johnson when Bryce Young's playing. I don't want to go buy either of them, right? They've had their boom weeks with the other quarterback, but if Will Levis is playing the rest of the season, I just don't want any of it because it's at best it's going to be crazy inconsistent, right? We saw 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago now, that Calvin Ridley had 8 targets and 0 receptions. That is in the range of outcomes for Calvin Ridley, even if he's seeing the volume. So I just want nothing to do with it. It scares me off. And yeah, it is definitely gross. My wide receiver sell is the Packers, Romeo Doubs. I know I've talked about Jaden Reed a couple weeks ago. This time I'm going with Romeo Doubs. Last 3 weeks, he's had 19, 17, and 10 fantasy points. On the season, though, Romeo Doubs only 1 game with over 5 receptions. He is the most consistent Packer in terms of snap share, so that's your selling point on this. But my issue right now with the Packers wide receivers is we have no idea who it's going to be week to week. Is it the Jaden Reed week? Is it the Romeo Doubs week? Is it the Dontavian Wicks week? Does Christian Watson start get it going? Is it just a Josh Jacobs week like it was last week? Could it be a Tucker Kraft week, right? I just think we have so many weapons on this offense that are all similarly talented enough, right? Or talented. I don't even know what I'm trying to say there. They're very, similarly talented. That's what I'm going to go with. I'm just sticking with it. That you just don't know who is going to be every single week. I think Jaden Reed's the most talented. I think Dontavian Wicks could end up being the wide receiver 2 on this team behind Jaden Reed. And so Romeo Doubs, 3 consistent weeks. I'm moving off of. I'm just moving for a guy that I know what I'm going to get week after week. And Doubs, you just don't know what it's going to be.
The hope at the beginning of the season, at least for these Packers wide receivers, was that one of them was going to like stand out and emerge as like the one in this offense. we saw it happen last year where it was like, yeah, none of these guys are really going to step up. And I'm willing to call that shot right now, halfway through the season. I'm not willing to take any more chances. I'm just going to make that decision right here that no one's really going to step up. And if someone does, sorry, I don't think there's any way you can predict that happening and who it will be. So like you said, there are much more consistent options out there. There are much better and safer options out there than Romeo Doubs. Romeo Doubs to me feels like kind of the DFS dart throw that you put in on certain weeks. But the problem is you don't even know like which week to put him in your lineups at that point. So I totally agree with you too. If you just try to get what you can for Dobbs, because I don't think anyone's really convinced over the last 3 weeks, even though it's been great, but just get what you can.
Yeah, I'll just give you a couple guys that I would, sell for take for Dobbs. Keon Coleman's one of them. I'd buy in on Keon Coleman. Just going, hey, he's the rookie, right? You're going to bank on him progressing. Dobbs, we kind of know where he's at. Josh Downs is another guy. I understand you got the quarterbacks going up and down, but he's been the consistent piece. In Indy right now, Xavier Worthy, I'd go get.
Back to Downs real quick. Like if Flacco is going to be the starter the rest of the year,
exactly.
Oof.
Yeah. It's some ridiculous upside that could be. Jameson Williams, I'd go, take for Dobbs just because, okay, if I'm going to bet on it, I'm going to bet on the offense I know is going to score more points, which is, Green Bay is good, but Detroit's on a different level right now. So I just think there's enough players that I can go sell Dobbs for. Alrighty, that wraps up our buys, our sells before week 9. We only have 2 of these left because trade deadlines are coming up quick, which means you actually need to go out and make these moves. You can't sit here and listen anymore and go, ooh, these sound good. Now you actually need to go make the move. Make sure you're following us. I'm at Camlaw FFF on the X, at Tyler_Plath. You can follow the fellows at FFFellows on the X, the FFFellows on Instagram, Fantasy Football Fellows on YouTube, Facebook, and TikTok. Fantasy Football Fellows Shorts on YouTube. But make sure that you're subscribed. Make sure you're following along. We got short form content coming out every single day. We got 24 starts and sits coming out tomorrow, and then 3 podcasts a week, every single week through the rest of the football season. So make sure you are following along. But with that, hopefully you can make one of these trades. Hopefully we win week 9. We will see you tomorrow. Deuces.
Deuces.